Hello, Divine Mercy parishioners. I hope you are doing well. Hope this finds you well on Saturday morning, whenever the email goes out, or whenever you tune in to watch. Wanted to share some good news that we received. I think it came in last night, especially since I will not be at Mass this weekend in order to share it with you. I don't want to put it off another week. It's the good news that the Archbishop is going to be lifting the dispensation from Sunday and Holy Day of Obligation Mass attendance. And this is going to go into effect on Corpus Christi Sunday, Corpus Christi weekend, which is June 5th and 6th. So, what does that mean? That means following the normal rules that we have, the expectation is for all Catholics to be at Mass every Sunday and Holy Day of Obligation, and that is held to you under penalty of sin. It's grave matter and therefore has a potential to be mortal in nature. And so, why do I call this good news? One is, I think it shows us again the seriousness with which we need to take the Eucharist. It shows us the fact that this is the answer to all of the world's problems, the Eucharist. It's Jesus himself, God, the second person of the Trinity, under the appearance of bread and wine. And to reinstate this obligation, I think, is a beautiful message to the world, and especially in our archdiocese, of how important this is. We're in a position now that through consultation, I know the bishop checks in with quite a few people, doctors and other organizations and government officials, to think that we're in a position where we can do this safely. And we'll talk about those who maybe should still stay away at the end, because the rules are the same, which means there's always an opportunity for those who are at risk to not be here and be not in a state of sin. But I first want to talk about the importance of the Eucharist again. So hopefully, again, in my time here as pastor for almost 3 years now, you've gotten the sense that I understand the Eucharist to be the most important thing that we do. It's what the church teaches. It's the source and summit of our faith. There is nothing more important. There are two quotes I quickly found that are a little shorter in nature. There's some other that are just as beautiful, if not more so, of what John Paul II talked about with the Eucharist. But I think they'll hopefully draw us in of why this is an important rule for us to have. The Eucharist is a priceless treasure. By not only celebrating it, but also by praying before it outside of Mass, we are enabled to make contact with the very wellspring of grace. It's a priceless treasure. By not only celebrating, by not only going to Mass, by celebrating the Eucharist, celebrating the Mass, but also by praying before it outside, before Mass, after Mass, spending a few minutes in prayer, coming to adoration on Wednesdays or when we have our holy hours at the beginning of the month or at other times of festivity, which is when we tend to have them now. It gives us contact with the wellspring of grace, with Christ himself. Since I'm gone this weekend, and then Deacon Vince will be preaching the following week, and I have just recorded my two more reflections and homilies for the next couple of Sundays. And 2 weeks from now, the fourth Sunday of Easter, our first reading talks about how it is only in Christ that we are saved. And so you can listen to my reflection on my podcast. But there's only a way in which we make it home to heaven. It's through Christ, and so there's no better way to do that by than celebrating the mystery through going to Mass and then praying before it in adoration. And second quote: the Eucharist is the heart of the Church. Where Eucharistic life flourishes, the life of the Church will blossom. If we get the most important thing right, everything else will take care of itself. If we have a proper love of the Eucharist, when we're at Mass, when we're in adoration, when we enter into the church, if we have that right, everything else we do as a church will be okay. And that's our call to mission. That's our call to love. That's loving our neighbor. So first we love God, then we love neighbor. And so we'll be able to feed the poor more appropriately. We'll clothe the naked more appropriately. Give drink to the thirsty more appropriately. Admonish the sinner more appropriately. We'll be able to teach the ignorant all of the works of mercy. We'll be able to live out our faith in a way in which we're supposed to, if we keep ourselves centered in the Eucharist. As I try to remind us from time to time, the rules the church gives us are not so that the church can lord them over us. People sometimes think the church is on a power trip, but there's not a single rule that we have that makes my life easier. Somebody watching this is going to be upset by the fact we're moving in this direction. These rules are there to tell us what is important. The rules are there to help us get to heaven. And I think that by reinstating this, of reminding people of how important this is, that it's under penalty potentially of mortal sin, it'll keep us anchored in who we truly are, which is supposed to be a Eucharistic people, centered in the Mass, centered in Jesus himself, which allows us to go out into the world to do the good work that we're supposed to do. But it starts first and foremost with Eucharist. We've talked about that with St. Teresa of Calcutta, that she always begins her day with a holy hour, began her day with a holy hour, and then they would go feed the poor. Nobody did a better job than St. Teresa and her sisters. And so what about those still at risk? The church has always taught that if you're first and foremost sick, don't go to Mass. You're automatically dispensed by the nature of your sickness, your illness, that you don't need to be at Mass. So sometimes people come to confession and say, "Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been so long since my last confession. I didn't make it to Mass last week." And I always say, "Well, what was going on? Was it a one-time deal, or is this a habit?" "Well, I was vomiting." And I say, "Thank you for not coming to Mass. That was an appropriate day not to come to church." There's no sin. And so if you're sick, don't come. If you're at risk, you're still not obliged to come. That's nothing new. So this dispensation, in one sense, was unnecessary. I get it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have done it. But in one sense, it was unnecessary because whenever there's a legitimate risk, we're not required to be here. And so almost every winter when cold and flu season comes, I have somebody who's battling cancer come and talk to me about their situation. Say, "Father, I'm going into these treatments. My immune system's going to be greatly compromised. If I catch a cold, it could kill me. What do I do?" I say, "You stay home." The church never expects us to have to risk our life in order to be at Mass. And so if you're still sick, or at great risk of being sick, you can stay home. That's okay. I know there are people with still conditions that are out there. It will not be expected that you have to return. Now, if you have any question whatsoever, it's probably not a bad idea to ask me about it, to follow up with it. And the pastor has the ability to tell you that you're okay to stay away. So we want to be mindful of that those who are at risk, we're not putting them at risk now. You can stay away and you're fine. It's not sin. You don't have to bring it to confession. Same with anybody who's missed in this last year since the dispensation went into effect, or 13 months now. We want to be mindful that that's a rule and it's always been there. It will always be there. I always remind people that every winter season, especially now that I'm at the rectory here on grounds, there's no reason for me not to say the Mass. And I have to, because I've taken those Mass intentions. So I have to say each one of our Sunday Masses. And I can walk across the parking lot pretty safely, not a problem. But I tell people, if you can't come, if there's 8 feet of snow outside, you're not expected to be here. It's the same thing with the illness. So if you're still at very high risk, you're okay. You don't have to be here. And that's the same every year. Again, I get those questions every cold and flu season because there are people at greater risk because of other things that are going on in their life, and that's okay. The church does not expect you to have to come and potentially die at Mass. You're always free to do so if you feel so inclined, and I know people that have, and that's okay. Part of our tradition as well, dying for the sake of being at Mass, but there's no expectation whatsoever. You're completely free, no sin whatsoever, to stay home if you have a legitimate reason. And again, if there's any question, reach out to me. I won't be around this week, but after I get back, we can touch base if we need to. There's still quite some time to figure this out, exactly what it's going to look like. And so what do we need to do now? We've got a couple of things we've been talking about and trying to get the word out to letting our brothers and sisters know. Again, our Lenten focus was on trying to make sure our brothers and sisters who've been away come back. Start talking to them. Bring this up. Those people who haven't been at Mass, the people that probably need to see this the most, at least for the most part, there might be a few exceptions of those of you who are checking in, aren't going to be watching the video. Bring it up with your friends. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. But that's what we're called to do. Again, especially my 4th Sunday of Easter, the reflection that will come out next week on my podcast addresses some of this. We have this call to go out there, to share the good news with other people. And one of them is that we're in a position now that seems to be safe enough to come to Mass, and we've been following good protocols, and by God's grace, it hasn't been a hotbed of it, it hasn't been a super spreader. So make sure we are inviting our brothers and sisters, we're inviting our friends back to Mass, letting them know the importance. Maybe don't start with the sinful part of the obligation, especially those who have been away for a while, but welcome them back. Share what you get out of the Mass, what Christ has done for you, the ways in which our Lord speaks to you, and invite them into a deeper relationship with Him today, and find a way of celebrating that together. Again, this is where the church becomes the church, where we live out our mission most concretely, and it gives us the strength to do good things out in the world. So please help me in starting to spread the word with our brothers and sisters. So again, Corpus Christi weekend, June the 5th and 6th, the obligation to Mass will be reinstated, the dispensation will be lifted, and we hope to see all of our brothers and sisters there. Hope you have a wonderful day. God bless, and know that I'm praying for you this week away.